She doesn't understand a word anyway, Nathaniel Reed said in flawless Arabic, lifting his crystal glass just enough for the men at the table to smirk. People like her are trained to smile, nod, and disappear. The billionaire's son nearly choked on his sparkling water, as the young waitress standing beside them slowly lowered the wine bottle in her hand. The violin music continued drifting across the rooftop restaurant high above Manhattan. But at table 17, something had shifted. The laughter around Nathaniel's table faded one heartbeat at a time as the waitress calmly placed the bottle onto the white linen cloth and answered him in perfect Arabic. "I understood every word, sir," she said softly. "I was simply deciding whether your son deserved to hear them." Silence crashed across the table harder than any shout could have. Nathaniel froze with the glass halfway to his lips. Across from him, two Saudi investors exchanged stunned glances. One of them blinked so hard it looked painful. Ethan Reed stared at the waitress like he just watched someone step through fire without getting burned. She couldn't have been older than 28. Dark skin. Neatly pinned curls beneath the restaurant's gold-trimmed uniform cap. Small silver earrings that caught the candlelight each time she moved. Her name tag read Amara. Nothing about her appearance suggested she belonged in the middle of a multilingual humiliation reversal unfolding 40 stories above Fifth Avenue. Yet somehow she had just stripped all the power out of the room without raising her voice once. Nathaniel slowly set his drink down. The faint clink of crystal against marble sounded embarrassingly loud now. "Well," he said after a tense second, forcing a thin smile, "this evening just became more interesting." But the investors were no longer smiling with him. One of them, Sheikh Karim Al-Hassan, leaned back in his chair and studied Amara carefully. "Your pronunciation is excellent," he said in Arabic. "Where did you study?" Amara met his gaze respectfully. "Georgetown University, sir." Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Ethan noticed it immediately. He noticed everything tonight. The twitch in his father's temple. The way his fingers pressed too hard against the stem of his glass. The discomfort spreading through a man who normally controlled every room he entered. Amara reached for the wine bottle again with steady hands. "Would you still like the Cabernet Reserve, Mr. Reed?" she asked politely, switching back to English as though none of this had happened. Nathaniel stared at her for a moment too long. He was used to people reacting differently after embarrassment. Angry, defensive, nervous. But she looked completely composed. That unsettled him more than the Arabic itself. Around them the rooftop glowed with Manhattan wealth. Gold light reflected across polished black marble. Waiters moved silently between billion-dollar conversations. Below the glass railing, yellow taxi lights streamed through the city like rivers of electricity. Yet table 17 had become the true center of gravity in the room. People were pretending not to stare now. Pretending not to listen. Failing at both. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Dad," he said quietly, "maybe we should just apologize." Nathaniel looked at his son sharply. Not angry. Worse. Caught off guard. Amara gently poured the wine into Sheikh Karim's glass first. The investor thanked her in Arabic again, this time with visible respect. She answered effortlessly. Nathaniel watched every word pass between them without understanding a single syllable now. And for the first time in years, the billionaire found himself sitting at a table where he was no longer the most powerful person in the conversation. The rest of the dinner never recovered. Conversations resumed across the rooftop in fragments and nervous laughter, but table 17 remained wrapped in a strange stillness that even the violinist seemed to feel. Nathaniel Reed adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit for the third time in less than 2 minutes, a habit Ethan recognized from shareholder meetings when things were slipping beyond his father's control. Only tonight there were no reporters, no cameras, no hostile investors. There was just a waitress carrying a silver tray with more composure than the billionaire who owned half the skyline beneath them. Amara returned moments later with another bottle of Cabernet balanced carefully against her palm. She moved with the same calm precision as before, but now every pair of eyes seemed drawn toward her. Not because of the uniform, not because of the tray, because she had done something nobody in Nathaniel Reed's orbit ever managed to do. She had embarrassed him without trying to. Sheikh Karim swirled the wine in his glass slowly. "Your Arabic sounds Jordanian in certain phrases," he observed casually. "Most Americans do not catch those differences." Nathaniel reached for his glass too quickly. A small splash of wine hit the tablecloth. Ethan noticed his father's jaw tighten again. Amara offered a linen napkin immediately. "My professor was from Amman," she explained politely. "Some accents stay with you." Kareem smiled faintly. "Clearly." Nathaniel finally leaned back in his chair. "You studied overseas?" he asked, trying to sound conversational, but the question landed sharper than intended. "For a semester," Amara answered. "Before life changed plans for me." She said it simply. No bitterness. No invitation for pity. Somehow that made Nathaniel even more curious. He studied her face as though trying to solve a puzzle that irritated him. A waitress was supposed to remain background noise in places like this. Efficient. Invisible. Forgettable. But Amara Brooks had stepped directly into the center of the room without demanding attention once. Ethan glanced between them carefully. His father looked unsettled in a way he had never seen before. Nathaniel Reed dominated boardrooms, senators, television hosts, entire companies. Yet tonight he seemed strangely defensive around a woman carrying wine glasses. "You should have mentioned your language skills earlier," Nathaniel said finally. Amara met his eyes calmly. "Nobody asked." Ethan lowered his gaze quickly to hide the smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Across the table, one of the investors let out a quiet cough that sounded suspiciously like laughter. Nathaniel heard it too. The billionaire's fingers drummed once against the marble tabletop before going still. Around them, candlelight flickered against the glass walls overlooking Manhattan. Helicopter lights drifted through the dark sky beyond the rooftop. Somewhere below, sirens echoed faintly between avenues. But inside the restaurant, the atmosphere around table 17 had changed completely. Nathaniel was no longer hosting the evening. He was surviving it. A restaurant manager appeared near the table then, moving quickly in polished black heels. Olivia Kane offered Nathaniel a professional smile that almost concealed her concern. "Mr. Reed, I apologize for any discomfort this evening," she began carefully. Before Nathaniel could answer, Kareem interrupted in calm Arabic. "The only discomfort came from arrogance, not service." Olivia blinked, confused by the language but fully understanding the silence that followed it. Nathaniel's expression hardened for half a second. Then he forced another polished smile onto his face. "No harm done," he said smoothly. But Ethan knew his father too well. The billionaire only smiled like that when something had bruised his pride deeply. Amara lowered her eyes respectfully and stepped back from the table. Yet just before she turned away, Ethan noticed something small. Her hand tightened briefly around the silver tray, just enough for the candlelight to tremble across the polished metal. It was the first sign all night that those words in Arabic had affected her at all. By the time dessert arrived, Nathaniel Reed had stopped tasting anything on the table. The imported sea bass, the truffle risotto, the $1,200 Bordeaux sitting untouched beside his plate all blurred into meaningless details beneath the pressure building quietly behind his ribs. Across the rooftop restaurant, conversations had returned to normal volume, but every now and then he still caught someone glancing toward table 17. Toward her. Amara moved between tables with effortless calm, carrying polished silver trays beneath the soft amber glow of the hanging lights. If the confrontation had rattled her, she hid it better than anyone Nathaniel had ever met. That bothered him more than anger would have. Anger he understood. Silence was harder. Ethan leaned back in his chair and watched his father carefully. "You are staring again," he said quietly. Nathaniel reached for his water. "I am observing." "No," Ethan replied. "You are trying to figure out why she did not break." Nathaniel shot his son a sharp glance, but before he could answer, Olivia Kane returned to the table carrying a tablet against her chest. The restaurant manager offered another polite smile, though there was tension around her eyes now. "Mr. Reed, Sheikh Kareem asked me to send over information regarding the charity gala next month." Nathaniel nodded distractedly. Then, almost casually, he asked, "How long has Amara worked here?" Olivia blinked once, clearly surprised by the question. "About 11 months. Nathaniel looked back toward the far side of the rooftop where Amara was speaking softly to an elderly couple near the windows. The woman at the table laughed warmly at something she said. Even from across the room, Amara carried herself differently from the other staff. Not superior. Not arrogant. Simply composed in a way that did not match the uniform. She does not seem like restaurant staff, Nathaniel murmured. Olivia hesitated carefully. She is not exactly typical staff. Ethan immediately looked interested. Nathaniel slowly turned back toward the manager. Meaning? Olivia shifted the tablet slightly in her hands. Amara mostly works nights because she takes care of her mother during the day. That still does not explain Georgetown, Nathaniel replied. Olivia studied him for a moment as if deciding how much to reveal. Then she lowered her voice slightly. She studied international linguistics there. Full scholarship. Arabic, French, and Farsi. Ethan's eyebrows lifted instantly. Nathaniel stared toward Amara again, this time with genuine confusion crossing his face. And she became a waitress? Olivia gave a small shrug. Life is expensive in New York. Something in the way she said it made Ethan lower his eyes. The billionaire remained silent for several seconds. Around them, the city shimmered beyond the rooftop glass like another universe entirely. Limousines crawled through midtown traffic 40 stories below. Helicopter lights blinked over the Hudson. Somewhere in the distance, a fairy horn echoed through the night air. Nathaniel had spent his entire life believing talent naturally rose to the top. Yet the woman carrying dessert plates across the rooftop had just shattered that belief without even trying. She was supposed to work overseas after graduation, Olivia continued carefully. United Nations internship. Translation services. Ethan looked stunned. What happened? For the first time all evening, Olivia's expression softened fully. Her mother got sick. The answer settled heavily over the table. Nathaniel looked down at the untouched wine beside his hand. A memory surfaced unexpectedly then. His own mother sitting alone in a hospital room years ago, while he attended a merger meeting in Singapore instead of flying home. He pushed the thought away immediately. Across the rooftop, Amara reached the pianist near the center platform and quietly adjusted a candle that had nearly burned out. The small flame steadied beneath her fingers. Ethan watched her for a second before speaking again. Dad, he said softly, do you know what the strange part is? Nathaniel barely looked up. What? Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on Amara. She had every reason to embarrass you tonight. His voice lowered further. But she did not. Nathaniel said nothing, because deep down he knew his son was right. The woman he insulted had protected his dignity more carefully than he protected hers. The dinner finally ended just after 10:30, but Nathaniel Reed walked out of the rooftop restaurant carrying something far heavier than his wool overcoat. The investors disappeared into a private elevator surrounded by assistants and security, while soft jazz drifted through the lobby below. Ethan loosened his tie as they crossed the marble floor toward the valet entrance, but Nathaniel suddenly stopped walking. Through the glass doors leading back toward the restaurant hallway, he spotted Amara again. She was standing near the service station beneath a dim gold wall light, quietly organizing receipts beside a stack of folded linen napkins. The other waitstaff moved around her quickly, exhausted from the dinner rush, but she remained composed in that same unsettling way. Nathaniel stared for a second before turning sharply toward Ethan. Wait in the car. Ethan frowned immediately. Dad. 5 minutes. The tone ended the conversation. Ethan hesitated, then reluctantly headed toward the revolving doors where the black town car waited outside under the Manhattan lights. Nathaniel adjusted his coat once before walking back through the hallway alone. His expensive shoes echoed softly against polished stone as he approached the service station. Amara noticed him almost instantly but did not look surprised. She simply placed another receipt into the drawer and closed it carefully. Mr. Reed, she said politely. Did something need attention? Nathaniel stopped a few feet away. Up close, the exhaustion beneath her calm expression was easier to see now. Faint shadows beneath her eyes. A slight tension in her shoulders. The kind carried by people working longer hours than they admitted. But her voice remained steady. You embarrassed me tonight. The words landed colder than he intended. Amara met his gaze without flinching. No, sir, she answered gently. I think you embarrassed yourself. For a moment, neither of them moved. Somewhere deeper in the restaurant, dishes clinked softly in the kitchen. A bartender laughed at something near the lounge area before the sound faded again. Nathaniel let out a quiet breath through his nose. Most people would have made a scene. Most people are angry when they are insulted. Her eyes lowered briefly toward the folded napkins. I was disappointed. That word hit him harder than he expected. Nathaniel had spent years becoming immune to criticism. Investors feared him. Competitors avoided him. Employees rehearsed conversations before entering his office. Yet somehow disappointment from a waitress felt worse than hatred. You think you know me because of one conversation? He asked. Amara shook her head slightly. No. I think your son knows you better than anyone at that table. Nathaniel's expression tightened immediately. She noticed it. So did he. The woman standing before him had an uncomfortable habit of seeing directly through polished surfaces. Ethan is young, he replied. Young people mistake emotion for wisdom. Maybe, Amara said softly. Or maybe adults mistake power for character. The silence after that stretched painfully thin. Nathaniel looked away first, glancing toward the rain-speckled windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. Traffic lights glowed red and white through the dark glass below. Somewhere outside, a horn blared briefly before disappearing into the city noise. Why work here? He asked suddenly. Someone with your education could make far more money elsewhere. Amara folded the final napkin carefully before answering. My mother forgets things now. Her voice remained calm but softer than before. Some days she remembers my name. Some days she thinks I am still 10 years old. Nathaniel slowly looked back at her. The medical bills? She nodded once. And the home care? Insurance only covers part of it. He stared at her for a long second, noticing the tiny details he had ignored earlier. The loose thread near the cuff of her uniform sleeve. The small notebook tucked beside the receipts with Arabic handwriting covering the edges of the page. The silver bracelet on her wrist worn thin with age. None of it matched the image he had first created in his mind tonight. You could have humiliated me in front of everyone, he admitted quietly. Amara gave a faint, almost tired smile. Humiliation does not improve people, Mr. Reed. Nathaniel opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. Because standing there beneath the soft restaurant lights, he realized something deeply unfamiliar. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to him without fear, without greed, and without pretending his money made him wiser than everyone else. And somehow that frightened him far more than the Arabic ever did. Rain had started falling by the time Nathaniel Reed stepped outside the restaurant. Thin silver streaks slid across the black town car waiting at the curb while Manhattan shimmered beneath reflected traffic lights and glowing storefronts. Ethan sat in the back seat already, scrolling absently through his phone, but the moment his father climbed inside, he looked up immediately. Well. Nathaniel loosened his tie without answering. The car door closed with a heavy thud, sealing them inside the quiet leather interior. Outside, umbrellas drifted past like dark floating shapes beneath the city lights. Ethan studied his father carefully. You stayed longer than 5 minutes. Nathaniel stared through the rain-streaked window toward the glowing rooftop above them. Drive, he told the chauffeur. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. For several blocks, only the soft hum of tires against wet pavement filled the silence. Then Ethan finally spoke again. She was right, you know. Nathaniel did not look at him. About what? About power. Ethan's voice stayed calm. You use it like armor. Nathaniel let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That sounds like something from one of your college philosophy classes. No, Ethan replied quietly. It sounds like tonight. Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. The city blurred outside the tinted windows. Steam rose from subway grates beneath glowing traffic signals. Delivery bikes rushed through puddles while pedestrians huddled beneath awnings to escape the rain. Yet Nathaniel barely noticed any of it. His mind remained trapped beneath the soft gold lights of the restaurant hallway. The way Amara folded napkins while speaking to him without fear. The calm steadiness in her voice when she said humiliation did not improve people. Most people wanted something from him. Money, access, approval. But she had looked at him like none of those things mattered. That unsettled him deeply. Turn around, Nathaniel suddenly said. The chauffeur blinked in the mirror. Sir. Go back to the restaurant. Ethan stared. Dad, it is almost midnight. I know what time it is. The car slowed near the intersection before smoothly turning back toward Midtown. Rain tapped softly against the windows the entire drive. 20 minutes later, the rooftop restaurant looked quieter now, its glowing interior half empty beneath the late hour. Nathaniel stepped out beneath the awning before Ethan could question him again. Inside, chairs were already being stacked near the lounge area while staff wiped down marble tables. Beneath dimmed lighting, Olivia Kane looked up from the hostess stand with visible surprise. Mr. Reed. Nathaniel removed his gloves slowly. Is Amara still here? Olivia hesitated. Something cautious flickered across her face. She left about 10 minutes ago. Nathaniel glanced toward the elevators instinctively. Did she take the subway? No. Olivia lowered her voice slightly. Usually she takes the bus downtown after her shift. Nathaniel nodded once. Then something near the front window caught his attention. Through the rain-covered glass outside, across the street beneath a flickering pharmacy sign, he spotted Amara standing alone at a bus stop. Her dark coat was thin against the weather, one hand gripping the strap of a worn canvas bag pressed against her side. The city lights reflected off the wet sidewalk around her while passing taxis sprayed water across the curb. She looked smaller outside the restaurant, less untouchable somehow. Nathaniel stared through the glass silently. Ethan stepped beside him now, following his gaze toward the street. That is her. Nathaniel nodded faintly. Across the avenue, Amara shifted slightly beneath the rain, unaware she was being watched. Then a city bus rolled past without stopping because it was already full. She closed her eyes briefly before stepping back from the curb. Ethan looked at his father carefully. You are thinking about helping her. Nathaniel said nothing, but his hand tightened unconsciously around the leather gloves he still held. Because for the first time in years, the billionaire was experiencing something unfamiliar and deeply uncomfortable. Guilt. Not the polished public version used in charity speeches and corporate campaigns. Real guilt. Quiet guilt. The kind that sat heavily in the chest while a woman who spoke 5 languages waited alone in the rain after serving wealthy strangers all night. Outside, Amara adjusted the strap of her bag again and looked down the avenue for another bus. She had no idea the man who insulted her hours earlier was still standing there watching her through the glass, suddenly unable to walk away. The rain grew heavier as Nathaniel Reed stepped out beneath the awning and crossed the sidewalk toward the bus stop. Water splashed beneath his polished shoes while yellow taxi lights streaked across the wet avenue beside him. Behind the restaurant windows, Ethan watched in complete disbelief as his father approached the woman he had insulted only hours earlier. Amara noticed Nathaniel before he reached the curb. Her shoulders stiffened slightly, though her expression stayed calm. The digital sign above the shelter flashed delayed arrival times in dull orange letters while cold rain tapped steadily against the metal bench beside her. Nathaniel stopped a few feet away, suddenly aware of how absurd this looked. Billionaires did not stand at midnight bus stops in Manhattan, trying to fix conversations they should never have started. Yet there he was anyway. You are going downtown? He asked awkwardly. Amara adjusted the strap of her canvas bag. Brooklyn. Nathaniel glanced at the nearly empty avenue. At this hour? At every hour, she replied gently. A city bus roared past in the opposite direction, spraying mist across the curb. Nathaniel instinctively stepped back while Amara barely reacted at all. That small detail bothered him more than it should have. She was used to this. The cold. The waiting. The exhaustion. My driver can take you home, he said finally. Amara looked at him carefully beneath the glow of the flickering bus stop light. Why? The question landed harder than rejection would have. Nathaniel opened his mouth immediately, but no answer came. Because he did not fully understand it himself. Guilt perhaps. Curiosity. Or maybe the uncomfortable realization that a woman serving wine on a rooftop had exposed parts of him he spent years hiding behind money and reputation. It is raining, he said at last, sounding far less convincing than usual. To his surprise, Amara smiled faintly. Not mocking. Just tired. Mr. Reed, I ride the bus every night. Rain is not new to me. Across the street, Ethan finally stepped out from beneath the restaurant awning and walked toward them with his hands shoved into his coat pockets. The cold wind pushed damp strands of hair across his forehead as he approached the bus stop. I think what my father is trying to say, Ethan interrupted gently, is that he feels bad. Nathaniel shot his son a sharp look. Ethan ignored it completely. Amara lowered her eyes briefly, almost hiding another small smile. That sounds more honest. Nathaniel exhaled slowly through his nose. Somewhere above them, steam curled upward from a subway grate while neon reflections trembled across puddles along the curb. The city felt strangely quieter now despite the traffic. Ethan leaned against the metal bus shelter and glanced toward Amara. "How did you learn Arabic?" he asked. Nathaniel almost rolled his eyes at the sudden shift in conversation, but Amara answered calmly. "My grandfather spoke it." "Was he from the Middle East?" Ethan asked. "Detroit," she replied softly. Ethan blinked. Even Nathaniel looked surprised. "Your grandfather was from Detroit?" Nathaniel asked before he could stop himself. Amara nodded once. He worked in auto manufacturing with Lebanese immigrants when he was younger. He learned Arabic from them because he said language was how people survived loneliness. Her voice softened slightly at the memory. "Then he taught me." For a moment nobody spoke. Rain drummed steadily against the glass shelter overhead, while headlights swept across their faces every few seconds. Nathaniel studied her quietly. The way she spoke about language sounded nothing like business negotiations or elite universities. To her, words meant connection, survival, dignity, not leverage. Ethan glanced toward his father again. "You know," he said carefully, "this is probably the first real conversation you have had with someone outside your industry in months." Nathaniel gave him a dry look. "Thank you, Ethan. I am serious." Ethan looked back toward Amara. Most people around him are trying to impress him. Nathaniel folded his arms. "And she is not?" Amara met his gaze calmly beneath the rain-dimmed lights. "No, sir." The honesty in her voice hit with uncomfortable precision again. Then, before Nathaniel could respond, headlights appeared at the far end of the avenue. The bus finally approached through the rain with a low mechanical groan. Amara stepped closer to the curb and reached into her coat pocket for her transit card. Nathaniel watched her quietly, suddenly aware that he did not want the conversation to end yet. And that realization unsettled him almost as much as the Arabic had. The bus hissed to a stop beside the curb, its folding doors opening with a tired mechanical sigh that cut through the rain-soaked silence between them. Warm yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk while a handful of exhausted passengers stared absently through fogged windows. Amara stepped forward first, lifting her transit card toward the scanner near the entrance. Then she paused. Nathaniel Reed was still watching her with the same unsettled expression he had carried since the rooftop restaurant. Ethan noticed it too. The billionaire looked like a man trying to solve a problem money could not immediately fix. Amara glanced back over her shoulder. "Thank you for the offer," she said politely. "But I will be fine." Nathaniel nodded once, though something in his face suggested he was not satisfied with that answer. The bus driver looked impatient already. Rainwater dripped steadily from the shelter roof onto the sidewalk between them. Then Ethan suddenly stepped forward. "Wait." Amara turned slightly. Ethan shoved his hands deeper into his coat pockets, almost embarrassed by what he was about to say. "Would you maybe teach me Arabic sometime?" Nathaniel blinked in surprise. So did Amara. For the first time all night, her composure cracked just enough to reveal genuine confusion. "Why?" Ethan gave a small shrug. "Because tonight was the first business dinner I have ever survived without falling asleep." A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Soft, brief, but real. Nathaniel noticed the sound immediately. Somehow it transformed her entire face beneath the rain-dimmed bus light. "That is not a very high standard," she replied gently. "You have not met most people in my father's world," Ethan answered. Even Nathaniel let out the faintest breath of reluctant amusement at that. The moment lasted only a few seconds before the driver called impatiently from inside the bus. Amara adjusted the strap of her canvas bag again. "Good night, Ethan." Then her eyes shifted toward Nathaniel. "Good night, Mr. Reed." Nathaniel looked at her for a long second before speaking. "Good night, Amara." It was the first time he had said her name without distance attached to it. She seemed to notice. Without another word, Amara stepped onto the bus. The doors folded shut behind her with a heavy hiss, and moments later the vehicle pulled away from the curb, red taillights glowing through the rain as it disappeared into midtown traffic. Ethan remained standing beside his father beneath the bus shelter. "Well," he said quietly, "that was weird." Nathaniel kept watching the empty avenue where the bus had vanished. "What was you caring?" Nathaniel gave him a dry look. "I care about many things." Ethan nodded slowly. "Companies, mergers, numbers, market shares." His voice softened slightly. "People are newer." Nathaniel did not answer immediately, because deep down he knew his son was right. Back inside the town car, rain continued sliding across the dark windows while Manhattan drifted past in streaks of silver and neon. Ethan eventually leaned his head against the seat and closed his eyes, but Nathaniel stayed awake the entire ride downtown. His mind kept returning to small details he could not shake. The notebook with Arabic handwriting tucked beside the restaurant receipts. The exhaustion beneath Amara's calm expression. The way she defended his dignity even after he insulted hers. Somewhere near Wall Street, Nathaniel finally pulled his phone from his coat pocket. He opened a secure company database used for international contracts and scanned through archived translation files connected to Reed Global Holdings. Most were years old. Endless reports, negotiations, offshore agreements. Then suddenly one line caught his attention. Emergency Arabic mediation consultant. Amara Brooks. Nathaniel frowned immediately. He tapped the file open. A contract dispute in Dubai. 8 years ago, Reed Global had nearly lost $1 billion infrastructure agreement after a translation error triggered diplomatic tension during final negotiations. According to the archived notes, an emergency consultant corrected the interpretation overnight and prevented the collapse of the entire deal. Nathaniel stared at the screen as rain blurred the city beyond the car window. He remembered that deal. It became one of the largest expansions in company history. Bonuses were distributed. Executives celebrated for months. Yet he had never once heard the consultant's name before tonight. Ethan opened one eye sleepily beside him. "What are you looking at?" Nathaniel did not answer right away. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing phone screen in his hand. Because the woman he insulted over dinner had quietly saved his company years ago, without him ever knowing she existed. Nathaniel Reed barely slept that night. By 3 a.m, the lights inside his penthouse office still burned against the dark Manhattan skyline, while financial reports sat untouched across the glass desk. The only thing on his computer screen was the archived file bearing Amara Brooks's name. Emergency mediation consultant. Temporary contract. 8 years ago. Nathaniel leaned back slowly in his leather chair, rereading the notes for the 4th time. The translation dispute in Dubai had nearly destroyed Reed Global's expansion into the Middle East. Executives panicked. Lawyers prepared damage control statements. Then suddenly, according to the report, a 20-year-old graduate student named Amara Brooks corrected a critical interpretation error during overnight negotiations and prevented the collapse of the agreement. Estimated company savings. $1.4 billion. Nathaniel stared at the number in silence. $1.4 billion. He remembered congratulating senior executives after the deal closed. Champagne. Press interviews. Bonuses larger than most people's yearly salaries. Yet the woman responsible for saving the agreement had vanished into a footnote buried inside company archives. His phone buzzed softly against the desk. "Ethan." Nathaniel answered immediately. "You are awake?" Ethan sounded half asleep. "I could ask you the same thing." Nathaniel glanced toward the glowing city outside his office windows. "Did you know Reed Global used Amara as a consultant years ago?" Silence filled the line for a second. Then Ethan sat up audibly on the other end. "Wait. Seriously? Dubai contract negotiations?" Nathaniel rubbed a hand slowly across his jaw. "She prevented a diplomatic dispute that nearly cost us the deal." Ethan let out a low whistle. "So the Waitress saved your company." The words landed with uncomfortable accuracy again. Nathaniel closed the file quietly. "Apparently." Ethan was silent for another moment before speaking more softly. "Dad, are you okay?" Nathaniel almost laughed at the question, but he understood why his son asked it. Something about tonight had unsettled him in ways boardrooms never could. I insulted someone extraordinary because I assumed she was invisible, Nathaniel admitted quietly. That is not a good feeling, Ethan. On the other end of the line, Ethan's voice softened. No, it probably is not. By noon the next day, rain clouds had finally cleared above Manhattan, leaving the city washed clean beneath pale winter sunlight. Nathaniel stood inside a quiet florist shop on Madison Avenue staring down at rows of white orchids and roses with visible discomfort. The young cashier blinked nervously while waiting for his decision. Billionaires did many things confidently. Buying apology flowers was apparently not one of them. Too dramatic? Nathaniel asked, gesturing awkwardly toward a large arrangement. The cashier glanced at the orchids. Depends what you did. Nathaniel considered answering honestly before deciding against it. 20 minutes later, he stepped into the lobby of the rooftop restaurant carrying a smaller arrangement of white lilies wrapped in dark paper. Olivia Kane nearly dropped the reservation tablet when she saw him. Mr. Reed. Nathaniel cleared his throat lightly. Is Amara working today? Olivia's expression shifted immediately into something dangerously close to amusement. Lunch shift. She is upstairs. Nathaniel nodded once and stepped toward the elevator. The rooftop restaurant looked completely different in daylight. Sunlight poured through the glass walls overlooking Manhattan, while business executives crowded tables beneath the quiet sound of piano music. Nathaniel spotted Amara almost instantly near the far side of the dining room carrying a tray of sparkling water glasses between tables. She stopped walking the second she noticed him approaching. For a brief moment, genuine surprise crossed her face. Nathaniel held out the flowers awkwardly. I was informed apologies are supposed to involve these. Amara blinked once, then twice. Around them, the restaurant noise seemed to soften slightly as nearby staff pretended not to stare. Mr. Reed. Nathaniel exhaled slowly before speaking again. 8 years ago, you saved my company during the Dubai negotiations. Her expression changed immediately. Not proud, not excited, just quietly caught off guard that he knew. That was a long time ago, she said softly. Nathaniel nodded. And somehow I still managed to insult you anyway. For a second, neither of them moved. Sunlight reflected across the polished floor between them while distant traffic glimmered far below the rooftop windows. Then Amara finally accepted the flowers carefully into her hands. Her fingers brushed the dark paper wrapping as though she had not expected kindness to arrive from him at all. These are beautiful, she admitted quietly. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment before answering. So was your work. I just noticed far too late. 3 weeks later, the ballroom inside the Grand Meridian Hotel shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers and soft golden light, as New York's business elite gathered for the annual Reed Global International Summit. Waiters moved silently between tables dressed in white linen, while camera flashes sparked near the entrance where executives and diplomats exchanged polished smiles. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel Reed beneath the massive stage screen displaying the company logo behind him. Yet tonight something about him felt different, less untouchable. Ethan noticed it immediately from his seat near the front of the ballroom. His father kept glancing toward the entrance every few minutes like a man waiting for someone important. Then finally, the ballroom doors opened quietly. Conversation softened almost instantly. Amara Brooks stepped inside wearing a simple midnight blue dress beneath a long black coat, her curls pinned neatly above silver earrings that caught the chandelier light each time she moved. She looked elegant but not because of the dress. It was the same calm dignity she carried at the rooftop restaurant, only now there was nothing distracting people from it. Nathaniel watched her cross the ballroom floor with the same expression he once reserved for billion-dollar negotiations. Careful, respectful, honest. Ethan smiled faintly from his table. Weeks earlier, he never would have imagined his father looking nervous around anyone. Yet there Nathaniel stood adjusting his cufflinks for the third time in 2 minutes. Amara approached the stage area slowly as guests whispered around the room. Some recognized her from the restaurant incident that had quietly spread through certain business circles. Others simply noticed the unusual attention Nathaniel Reed seemed to give one woman in a room full of world leaders. Nathaniel stepped down from the stage before she reached him. You came, he said softly. Amara glanced around the ballroom filled with powerful strangers and expensive champagne glasses. Your assistant called 3 times. Nathaniel almost smiled. I was trying to be persuasive. You were trying to make sure I said yes. The honesty in her voice carried the same quiet precision that unsettled him from the beginning. But tonight, instead of resisting it, Nathaniel nodded. That too. Before she could answer again, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly and the host announced Nathaniel's keynote presentation. Applause rippled through the room as he returned to the stage. Normally Nathaniel delivered speeches with effortless confidence. Markets moved when he spoke. Investors listened carefully to every sentence. But tonight, his eyes found Amara standing near the edge of the ballroom before he said a single word. 8 years ago, Nathaniel began slowly. My company nearly lost one of the most important international agreements in our history because of a translation error. The ballroom grew quieter immediately. Executives exchanged confused glances. This was not part of the published speech. Nathaniel continued anyway. At the time, everyone congratulated senior leadership when the crisis was resolved. Bonuses were distributed. Careers advanced. His voice lowered slightly. But the person who actually saved the agreement was almost completely forgotten. Across the ballroom, Amara stood perfectly still beneath the chandelier light. Ethan watched her expression carefully. Surprise flickered there now. Real surprise. Nathaniel looked directly toward her before speaking again. Her name is Amara Brooks. The silence that followed spread through the ballroom like a wave. Nathaniel stepped away from the podium slowly. 3 weeks ago, I insulted her because I assumed education, intelligence, and dignity could be measured by status. He paused briefly. I was wrong. Nobody in the ballroom moved. Even the waitstaff had stopped walking. Nathaniel's voice softened further. Some people speak many languages, but the rarest people speak respect fluently even after they are disrespected themselves. Ethan lowered his eyes for a second, hiding the faint emotion tightening in his chest. Because he knew how difficult those words were for his father to say publicly. Nathaniel extended one hand gently toward Amara. Miss Brooks recently accepted a position leading Reed Global's International Cultural Advisory Division. A ripple of stunned murmurs spread instantly through the ballroom. Amara blinked once, clearly caught off guard. Nathaniel had never told her he planned to announce it tonight. Their eyes met across the room for one long quiet second. Then slowly, beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers and the silence of an entire ballroom watching, Amara stepped forward. Not as a waitress. Not as someone invisible. But as the woman who had taught a billionaire the one language his money could never buy.